Welcome to Doc's Lab and our second Master Series. Welcome to Doc's Lab and our second Master Series. I do believe that this is the last video in our second Master Series. And we talked about why, because I want to get into a series of Master Producer, because I think it's going to be of much more value to you and to help you become that next level Master Audio Engineer. From the feedback I've gotten from the people I've talked to, that between the first Master Series and the second Master Series, we really addressed a lot of the topics we need to focus on to master those areas. And in the second Master Series, we really went in there and we talked about a whole lot of things that are going to be hugely important, that are going to be some of the most fundamental things you really need to focus on and master. So then to take your time to become a master engineer utilizing them and those concepts. And towards the end of it, we got into some of the most meat and potato things that I think are the most important things for you to master. First of all, that your composition is done well, your performers do a good job, your performances are done well, and your captures are done as well as possible, and your cleaning, whether in RX or with equalizers and filtering, in any way you can filter audio to clean it up, are some of the most important things. And after that, you've got your equalization, that's hugely important. Then you've got your reverberation, spatialization, stuff like that. And then sculpting. We talked about sculpting in the last segment, that, shaping the sound to where it sounds as good as possible from these great captures that you cleaned up really well, that you've got this great stuff to work with, to mix. Now, a whole lot of other stuff you'd be doing would be things like effects. Go light on it. Effects are for effect. It's not for something all the time. Use it every now and then to accent something, or the band asks for it, or you as an artist want to use it, or the producer wants to do something different in a certain area, or on the bridge, or on a break right before the bridge, or da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Effects are cool. You need to read about them, and just remember, go light. Don't process the crap out of things. Let the performance speak for itself. If you master all the things we've talked about so far, in the first Master Series, we went through recording, a lot of things before that, editing, processing, subgroup mixing, subgroup processing, group mixing, group processing, and mastering process fairly well. And in the second Master Series, we talked about a whole lot of things to just help you focus on things you really need to focus on to become that next level master engineer and master, because you really need to let the performance be the performance and not you engineer it to death. So whether or not you're talking about, the only other software that I really recommend, you buying Melodyne Studio. I recommend you buying the standard version of RX, because it's plenty for what you probably need as an engineer work on a production, even if you're trying to produce, top grade stuff. And I do now recommend SonarWorks. So you got a nice flat frequency response, so it's taking your room into consideration, your monitors into consideration, your headphones into consideration, so you're hearing things well, so that you make good decisions when you're processing, editing, mixing, and all that kind of stuff. Besides that, the other things that we've talked about, I'm not going to get into a whole lot more. We talked about a lot of things at the beginning of my first Master Series and at the beginning of my second Master Series, of a lot of things that aren't just directly related to engineering, but are concepts you really need to take into consideration. And effects are just something you need to read about and, master usage of them, and just remember, go light with them and take your time and don't overprocess stuff. The second thing I want to talk about is your DAW. Whatever DAW, most DAWs are comparable to the basic meat and potato things you need to focus on to be a good engineer, to get a good production done, are the most basic things that'll help you get the things done that I talked about in my first and second master series, that are the most important things so that your song can be radio ready. There's lots of fluff going in your DAW that you don't need to worry about, and it can be very inundating. Some of the stuff doesn't do as good a job as they say. A lot of plugins you buy, that you are over processing, you're over complicating things, and you're getting too much stuff fluffed up, rather than, keeping your the effects you have, the processors you have, a simple library of them, using the most basic meat and potato things that we've talked about, that you understand that your DAW can do to help you let the production stand on its own. You let the performance of the musicians, let the composition, and let the capture, the good capture and the good cleanup that you've done, stand on its own. And you just use your engineering skills to fix problems, or maybe sometimes to compress things a little bit, or to add a little bit of color here, or to do a little bit of sound sculpting, or fix the EQ a little bit, or when you do a little bit of spatialization, help something be in a space, and then you get in your mind, where things are supposed to be in the mix, and then put them there when you're mixing your subgroups, your main groups, and things like that, and let the production stand on its own. Don't overprocess the crap out of it. Don't think you're not being a good engineer because you don't do all this stuff to it. Worry about the meat and potato things of the compositions were done well, the transition done well, the whole production and the packages is put together well, then the performances are all done really well, as good as possible, and you just make sure of that, and then your captures are done when it was good as possible, and you cleaned it up as well as possible. Then you can do magic. Your job is to heighten it a little bit with equalization, with a little bit of spatialization, making things sound more, the ambience and the place that it's in sound really good. There's a little bit of sound sculpting to help things when they need it. Maybe a little bit of tuning, like with Melodyne, to kind of catch little things. It's the little things you just want to catch. You don't want to engineer it to death. If you're having that many problems, the problem is farther back in the line. It's not you. If you have to do all the things we've talked about and you just die in on this production, having to do all kinds of messed up stuff with your editing and your processing and your that there's other problems that happened way before you ever started doing engineering on the audio. So take that into consideration, so you don't think that you need to worry about all that stuff. If you see it, you're an engineer and you go, oh, and then I know how to fix that because I know the meat and potato stuff in my DAW there to help me get that done. A lot of that other fluff stuff is great, when you need it, I guess sometimes. And a lot of it's for, you get artists, and the DAWs will put all kinds of fluff stuff together for artists and composers that help them in their workflows when they're composing. And those areas you want to focus on if they're really something you think are going to help you in your compositions and while you're composing, and that's okay. And the arrangement tools that you have and things like that are very important. And the areas that you have, you've got, your mix area, understanding what's all going on in your mix area, so you understand your routing. Things are happening when they're coming in, when they're going out, and things that are in the middle that are in line, all the different kinds of buses, FX buses, all whatever's going on there, your sends, your inputs, your outputs, whatever all this stuff does, you want to be familiar with. And when you get into editing can be different when you're working with Midi or audio. And how are you able to edit it? What of it's fluff and what of it's really going to help you with the meat and potatoes to help you take all this stuff that you've really been very precautious with and done a really good job of, and when you actually have to be an engineer to fix problems, how's that stuff going to help you do that, to do the things we've talked about? And don't die worrying about that you have to be some complete master of your DAW, that you'll find that you're mastering, looking for the meat and potatoes, things that are of most importance to you to help you get the simple things done. A lot of that fluff stuff, can be great if you're like a full-time producer, or, and you are, and it's depending on your level, does that make sense? I've seen some people with some really complicated workflow that they've got a complicated workflow that is nothing like my workflow, because I keep it simple. as I can. Sometimes I'll go for hours and it sounds like that is just complicated beyond comprehension, but I don't really work like that. I have that stuff, I take into consideration that it's an option or a possibility or something I need to look for, but I go through things and it's like, you know, you see 4 or 5 pages from my notebook and it looks like, oh my God, but I go, oh, problem, dip, oh, problem, and I just keep on rolling. I don't sit around fussing with stuff or messing with stuff all the time if I don't need to, because I've worried about it farther back in the production towards the beginning of the production. So I don't spend so much time engineering. I'm letting the production stand on its own, and I just fix stuff and I enhance things when they need a little bit of enhancement with the equalization, a little bit of enhancement with the spatialization, a little bit of sound sculpting, you know, and then I start trying to picture where things are going to be sitting in this composition, and then start trying to take that visualization that we talked about, getting things where they're supposed to be in the mix, and how do I do that in a stereo environment as best I can. Does that make sense? And then start mixing, walking away, coming back, and things like that. You will find that if you spend your time worrying about those things more than a lot of the other fluff stuff, because I've seen people, they just get lost in it because they think they're just not a master of their tools, to where you need to master your meat and potatoes. The other stuff, don't worry about it so much. I mean, I got stuff coming into my DAW. They ask me, what is that? I don't know what the hell that is. I don't care. I don't ever use it. It's been in the DAW since I've had this DAW when it first came out, and I had the first version of it. And there's stuff that's come on that I don't never use. I checked it out and then it's gone. I don't need it. It's not going to help me in my meat and potatoes, and I don't worry about it. And there's lots of stuff like that somebody else might have there, like, oh, that's really cool, I like that. Because right now, next month or next year, I might change my mind, because I do. I feel like, I think that's really cool, and I utilize that, you know. And in 2 years, I'm like, no, I don't use that ever, never. It's a waste of time, or it's not really doing what I wanted it to do, and I want to simplify my workflow, because I want to focus on letting the production stand on its own, and helping that production stand up. And anything I can do to enhance it, to help it do that, is my job as an engineer, being that next level master audio engineer, is to catch things and fix things, enhance things a little bit, and let it stand on its own, not engineer it to death. Because I used to go there and I would just engineer the crap out of it till it was like I was like a vampire. I would suck all the life out of my production, and then be like, what happened? Well, it was like an apple and I sucked all the life out of it now, and well, it wasn't so bad. You know what I'm saying? Because I loved audio engineering. I thought I was doing right that way, and I just wasn't. I was over engineering and over processing and over messing with things, until I just, you know, just made a mess of it, rather than, you know, letting that product things. It's a lot of things I've talked about in this first second master series are for effect. I was talking about something like doubling tracks or something that would be really cool right at this bridge. You know, it's like, you know, or really cool right at this break to double the tracks or quadruple and make a wall of sound right there. Bam! You know, not all the dang time. You know what I'm saying? All that stuff doesn't happen all the time, but they're all great stuff to pull out your hat and go, well, I remember Doc, you know, talking to me about that. And right there at that ending or something, I could do some really cool thing, you know, and be like, whoa, that's really cool. As it faded down, I did that cool thing. That is really neat. Ta-da! You know, it's like, there you go. It's like, you know, fluorescent paint, you know, you got every now and then to put a little fluorescent color here and there, you know, make things a little stand out a little bit different, you know, you give your own flavor and your own style, and to make things just, you know, just a little different than the last one, so that everything is like a cookie cutters, you know, that it sounds exactly like the last blonde girl that came out with pink hair. You know what I'm saying? No offense, nobody, but you understand, you want to be a little different. So, you know, you got a lot, you're a girl, blonde girl with pink hair, got a bone through your nose for that one moment. Whatever, you know, it's like, I know that sounds funny, but it's true. And, you know, things to pull out of your hat to help a production when it could use some production, where it's, you know, most of the time that when the production stands on its own really well, that you will still want to stand back from over processing or over engineering it, and or doing things in it, adding effects or doing some other thing that I've talked about that's actually screwing the production up. That it's like, no, it's a great song, it's a great composition, it's great production, the dinner will go well, performance will go well. I don't want to screw it up no way, it's great, but every now and then it's cool just for an effect. But it's a personal decision way to do that. Just don't die in there rather than really working on and focusing on that production standing up for itself. And your job is to help it and enhance it, not kill it. Does that make sense? So don't kill it as an engineer. You will not have as much fun as an engineer. The people you work with won't like you as much, and you won't like yourself as much if you're producing your own stuff and you're your own artist doing your own stuff. You will have way less fun in your productions because you're engineering the hell out of it instead of worrying about getting a really good composition that has been put together really well and arranged really well, really good performances from performers that have just really honed their abilities and make sure that it's done really well. And, you know, and the really super good captures that you've taken your time with and cleaned up really well. So then you take in there and you start enhancing it and looking for little issues. Then you start mixing it together. Oh, yeah, buddy. Instead of you've killed it, sucked all the life out of it, and trying to think that you need to do all this stuff to be this next level master audio engineer, you know, where you should have been going back a few steps and making sure the other things. The other thing I wanted to talk about is I love MIDI stuff, okay? Now, I do because MIDI tools are awesome. I use them with my guitar, pianos, drums, all kinds of stuff. But MIDI stuff, when you get into edit MIDI stuff, that you get basic things are happening. Basic drums done on your MIDI keyboard or your pad, or piano stuff done on your keyboard, or synth stuff, or whatever you might be doing, you know, in your production, strings or whatever, getting in there and learning how to edit it really well. So when you render it to audio for your production, so that you, after you get done rendering it to audio, that you can go through and do other editing on it like you would be doing normally on normal audio, and going through that process like it was a normal piece of audio. Take your time with that, because there are all kinds of tools and little nuances that you need to really listen to, and listen to how it sounds naturally as composed to your VSTs and your MIDI stuff, that you need to compensate for and take into consideration, and how you can fix that kind of stuff to make it more natural. A really simple thing is like with keys. A lot of times with my strings or something, when I'm putting them in there, that they don't hit right on that beat. I have to drag all those notes back just a little bit, and sometimes it's very little, a 64th or something back a little bit, and it makes it come into it a little bit more naturally. You know, things like that. There's tons of different things, attacks and releases, and all kinds of things you really need to focus on and master those, rather than trying to engineer things to death later. Does that make sense? And it's just the same thing as you mastering being a keyboardist or a guitarist or something like that. You mastering those articulations and editing abilities in the MIDI environment, because they're hugely wonderful tools, is the same thing as that, rather than you engineering it to death later and just spending, you know, just killing yourself trying to engineer the heck out of it, of something that's just you didn't spend the time in there working on. So focus on the meat and potatoes and just take your time. You know, make simple compositions. If you're really worried about engineering, make some simple compositions, some simple piano stuff with a bass line, you know, and some vocals, and some backing vocals, and, you know, some short things, and really working on mastering them so that you can take a short piece that's a minute, half a minute long, and just all the aspects that are in that short piece, it sounds like a short verse or a chorus or whatever, and just master it. So everything in it sounds awesome. Master the things I've talked about, and implementing and applying those things in the ways that I've talked about. And you will find that if you master those things, and the meat and potato things happening with your DAW and your processors like I've talked about, that you will start to understand about becoming that next level master audio engineer as far as engineering is concerned. And your opinion of how it should be done, you know, is going to be monumental in you mastering yourself and your opinion and how you perceive it and how you think it should be done is going to really, you get over that. The other things will not seem so daunting, and you won't get lost, you know, instead of letting that production speak for itself. And so I want to kind of leave the second master series there and get you going there. In this next master series, we are going to talk about becoming a master producer, so that we're going to talk about all the things that, besides being an engineer, that what a master producer has to take into consideration that you should think about. That way that your job as a master audio engineer and that next level master audio engineer is much easier. You don't get lost in things, you don't overprocess things, you don't overanalyze things, you don't waste your time in areas you shouldn't. You focus on little areas that are a problem. This area on this performance, this little area is a problem. This one little area is a huge problem, that little moment of time. There's a problem here, there, somewhere in the production, some problem with the composition, the performers, the performance, the producers, you know, what he wants you to do, the capture, you know, things you really need to focus on that are going to make your job as an engineer much easier, because you won't be thinking about it. You will be going, I need to take that into consideration and then do my job as an artist, a performer, an engineer, and a producer. And I know these things I need to take into consideration so that I really can think about it and then move on. Does that make sense? Think about it. Do I need to check that off? Check it off. Go to the next thing. I need to check that out. Check it out. Next thing. Is that done? That way, and if it's not, oops, that's a problem, I need to fix that. You know, and spend time in areas fixing things, enhancing things, and working on things. And any one of those areas when you need to and when you should, rather than, you're confident. You're confident in your opinion, you're confident in your abilities, you're confident that you've seen that as an issue, and deal with it. And then move on. Get on. Don't sit around wasting your time on things to where you're convoluting yourself and complicating yourself, and you will end up not becoming that next level master audio engineer or that master producer, so that you can go through a production. Ba-bam, 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 ba-bam. Oh, problem. Done, check. Bam, ba-bam, 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 bam. Next problem. Done, check. Off you go. Does that make sense? And then let that production stand on its own. If that production and that composition and those performers can't stand on their own, you should be able to hear that as a master audio engineer and a master producer and go, well, there's only so much I'm going to do with this because there's problems everywhere, bro. So how much you paying me to fix all your problems? Does that make sense? And that's okay. Or if you have problems, what areas you need to focus on so you don't, as that next level master audio engineer and master producer, don't waste your time in areas you shouldn't. You check it and you go, and you check it and you go, and you check it and you go, and you build confidence in yourself, confidence in your opinion, confidence in your abilities, and fix things when you need to, and do a good job when you do anything to a piece of audio. So I hope that you enjoyed this second master series, and I hope it gave you a lot to think about in becoming that next level master audio engineer. And in the next series, we are going to make you, hopefully, if you pay attention and we get going along, a master producer. That way that you become a well-rounded engineer and master engineer. And when there's areas that are things that you need to take in consideration so that you can do really good work and take the understanding, knowledge, abilities, and wisdom that you have and be able to implement it well and where you should, when you should. So I certainly hope you enjoyed this second master series, and I will see you in the next master series, becoming that master producer. Peace, love. See you in the next video.